My name is Elena Brooks, and I was 23 years old when my sister decided I no longer deserved a place in the house we both grew up in. I say decided because that's exactly how it happened. Not after a fight, not after a warning, but after years of quiet resentment that finally found its moment. Growing up, I always felt like I was living on borrowed space. Like every room I entered needed permission I never officially had. Some kids grow up knowing where they stand in their family. I grew up learning how to stay small. My older sister, Vanessa, never had that problem. Vanessa was loud where I was quiet, confident where I hesitated. She knew how to walk into a room and bend it around her. Even as kids, she had this way of making adults listen, really listen, to her version of things. And somehow, her version always made me the problem. If a glass broke, it was because I must have bumped into it. If chores weren't done, I probably forgot again. If Mom was stressed or Dad was in a bad mood, Vanessa would sigh dramatically and say, "You know how Elena is." That sentence followed me my entire childhood. My parents never questioned it. They never asked why or how. They accepted it like a fact written into our family rules. Vanessa was the achiever, the responsible one, the daughter they bragged about. I was extra. At least, that's how it felt. One memory still sits heavy in my chest, even now. I was 14. Dad had left his watch on the kitchen counter, an expensive one he wore to work. Later that evening, he couldn't find it. Before I could even stand up from the couch, Vanessa spoke. "Maybe Elena took it," she said casually, not even looking up from her phone. The room went silent. I remember my heart pounding so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. "I didn't," I said immediately. "I swear." Dad didn't ask a single question. He just looked at me with disappointment already settled in his eyes. "Go to your room," he said. "We'll talk about this later." Later never came. The watch turned up 2 days after that, in Vanessa's gym bag. She laughed it off, said she must have tossed it there by accident. No apology. No consequences. That was the moment I learned something important. In our house, the truth didn't matter nearly as much as who said it. By the time we were adults, still living at home, nothing had changed, except Vanessa stopped pretending. She criticized everything I did. The way I dressed. The job I worked. The fact that I was still figuring things out. "She's 23, Vanessa would say loudly during dinner. "Don't you think it's time she acted like an adult?" My parents nodded along. I worked 2 part-time jobs. I paid rent. I bought my own groceries. But none of that counted. Vanessa had a better job, a louder voice, and most importantly, our parents' full loyalty. What I didn't know was that while I was trying to survive quietly, Vanessa was planning something bigger. The night before everything fell apart, I was in my room scrolling through my phone when I heard voices drifting down the hallway. My door was slightly open. Vanessa's voice was sharp. "I can't live like this anymore." My mom sighed. "We've talked about this." "No, you talked about it." "Nothing's changed," Vanessa snapped. "She's still here. Still taking up space." I held my breath. Dad laughed. Not awkwardly. Not nervously. He laughed like this was entertaining. "She really gets under your skin, huh?" "That's because she doesn't belong here anymore," Vanessa said. "She's an adult. She should figure it out somewhere else." There was a pause. My chest tightened. Then my dad said something that changed everything. "Well," he said lightly, "maybe it's time we stop babying her." My mom chuckled. "Honestly, it might be good for her. A wake-up call." Vanessa's tone softened, satisfied. "So you'll back me up?" "Of course," Dad replied without hesitation. We'll support you. I sat frozen on my bed, my hands shaking. They weren't arguing. They weren't unsure. They were agreeing. They were planning my exit like it was a home renovation. No one knocked on my door that night. No one checked if I was okay. They didn't need to. They had already decided. The next morning, Vanessa cornered me in the kitchen. She smiled like she'd already won. You should start packing, she said sweetly. Mom and Dad agree. It's time for you to move out. I looked past her at my parents. Dad was smiling. And for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. They weren't choosing her over me anymore. They had already chosen a long time ago. For a few seconds after Vanessa spoke, no one said anything. The kitchen felt too quiet, like the air itself was waiting to see what I would do. I searched my parents' faces one last time, hoping, stupidly, that one of them would say something. Anything. A question. A pause. A second thought. Dad leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, completely relaxed. Mom busied herself with rinsing a mug in the sink, as if this conversation were about groceries instead of my entire life. So, Vanessa said, tilting her head, you'll be out by tonight, right? Tonight. The word echoed in my head. I felt my throat tighten, but I forced myself to speak. Where am I supposed to go? Dad shrugged. Actually shrugged. You're smart, he said. You'll figure it out. Mom finally turned around. Her voice was calm, almost relieved. This will push you to grow, Elena. Vanessa needs her space. She's earned it. Earned it. I nodded slowly, because arguing felt pointless. Because begging felt worse. Okay, I said quietly. Vanessa smiled wide, triumphant. Good. I'll start measuring your room later. That was it. No family meeting. No timeline. No concern. I was being erased in real time. I went back to my room and closed the door. The walls felt smaller than they ever had before. This room, the only place that had ever felt even remotely mine, was already being taken from me. I packed in silence. Clothes. Toiletries. My laptop. A phone charger. The envelope where I kept the little cash I'd managed to save. Everything I owned fit into 2 bags. From down the hallway, I could hear laughter. Vanessa's laugh. My dad's deeper one underneath it. They were celebrating. At one point, Dad walked past my open door. He glanced inside, saw me zipping up my bag. Don't make this dramatic, he said, smirking. It's not like we're throwing you on the street. I looked up at him. That's exactly what you're doing. He laughed. Actually laughed. You'll be fine, he said. You always overreact. That laugh followed me all the way out the door. No goodbye. No hug. Not even a look back. The front door slammed behind me, loud and final. I stood on the porch for a moment, my bags at my feet, staring at the house I'd lived in my entire life. It didn't look any different, but I was no longer welcome inside it. I called a rideshare and sat on the curb while I waited. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them. Neighbors walked past, oblivious. Lights flicked on in other houses. Normal lives continued all around me. When the car arrived, I slid into the back seat and gave the address I'd memorized but never thought I'd need. My aunt's place, I said. The driver nodded and pulled away. As the house disappeared behind us, something cracked inside my chest. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough to hurt with every breath. The ride felt endless. Streetlights blurred past the window. I pressed my forehead against the glass, willing myself not to cry. Crying felt like giving them exactly what they wanted. When we pulled up, the house was quiet. One light glowed in the living room. I paid the driver, thanked him, and stood on the sidewalk, staring at the door. A new fear crept in. What if I wasn't welcome here either? I knocked. It took only a few seconds before the door opened. My aunt stood there, confused at first, then instantly alarmed. "Elena," she said. "What are you doing here?" That was all it took. My knees gave out, and I started crying before I could stop myself. She didn't ask questions. She pulled me inside and wrapped her arms around me like she'd been waiting for me all along. "They kicked me out," I choked. "They all agreed." Her face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "They did what?" I told her everything. About Vanessa. About the overheard conversation. About my dad laughing. About the door slamming behind me. By the time I finished, my chest hurt and my eyes burned. She sat quietly for a long moment, then reached for her phone. "I'm calling your uncle," she said. "And then I'm calling someone else." "Who?" I asked weakly. She met my eyes. "Someone your parents should have never underestimated." That night, lying on the couch under a borrowed blanket, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of another household breathing around me. I wasn't home. But for the first time in years, I felt safe. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the shock and exhaustion, something else stirred. A feeling I didn't recognize at first. Not hope. Not yet. Something sharper. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's smile. Heard his laugh. Felt the weight of the door slamming behind me like punctuation at the end of my existence in that house. Morning came quietly. Too quietly. The smell of coffee drifted through the hallway, rich and familiar in a way that made my chest ache. For a brief, disorienting second, I forgot where I was. Then reality settled back in. I was no longer my parents' daughter living at home. I was the problem they'd removed. I reached for my phone. 6 missed calls. 12 messages. All from my mom. "Where are you? You need to come home so we can talk. Vanessa didn't mean it like that. Your father thinks you're being dramatic." I stared at the screen, numb. Talk. They always wanted to talk after the damage was done. I didn't respond. At the kitchen table, my aunt sat across from me, watching me closely as I picked at my toast. She hadn't slept either. I could tell. "Your uncle's on his way," she said quietly. "There's something you need to hear." My stomach tightened. "About what?" She hesitated. "About the house." Before I could ask, the front door opened. My uncle stepped in, still wearing his work jacket. He looked tired, but angry in that controlled, dangerous way that scared people who deserved it. He didn't waste time. "Elena," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from me, "do you know whose name is actually tied to that house?" I frowned. "My parents." He shook his head slowly. "Not the way they think." My pulse picked up. "What do you mean?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "When your parents got married, they couldn't afford a place. Credit issues. No savings. Your grandmother didn't want you kids growing up unstable." My aunt exhaled sharply. "So our family stepped in." I felt cold. "Stepped in how?" "The down payment," my uncle said. "The mortgage guarantee. The paperwork. The house exists because of your family, not because of your parents." The words didn't fully register. "So, they don't own it?" I asked slowly. "They live in it," he corrected. "There's a difference." My hands started shaking. My entire childhood, the house, the power, the authority my parents wielded so easily, was built on something I never knew. "And they kicked you out," my aunt said quietly, her voice hard now. "Like you were nothing." My uncle stood. They made a mistake. Not yelled. Not threatened. Just stated a fact. He pulled a card from his wallet and placed it in front of me. Call this number. His name's Daniel. He's a lawyer. He owes me a favor. I stared at the card. I don't want to cause trouble. My uncle looked at me sharply. They already did. I called. My voice shook as I explained everything. Vanessa, the favoritism, the overheard conversation, the eviction, my dad laughing. I expected interruptions, questions, skepticism. Instead, Daniel listened. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said, "Your parents acted on an assumption that no longer protects them." My heart raced. What does that mean? It means, he said calmly, they thought they were untouchable. They aren't. The plan wasn't loud or dramatic. It was patient. Don't go back, Daniel told me. Don't answer their calls. Let them realize something's wrong on their own. They realized faster than expected. By noon, the tone of the messages changed. Please come home. Your father didn't mean to laugh. Vanessa is upset. We need to talk as a family. By evening, the calls started. Then something else happened. A knock at the door. A police officer stood on the porch, polite but cautious. We received a report that you might be missing. Missing? I almost laughed. I'm not missing, I said. I was kicked out. The officer nodded, like this confirmed what he already suspected. You're an adult. You're allowed to leave. He left shortly after. My uncle's jaw tightened. They're panicking. Good. That night, headlights flooded the driveway. My parents' car. Vanessa's too. They were on the porch before anyone could stop them, banging on the door like they still had authority here. You need to come out, my dad yelled. This has gone too far. My aunt opened the door just enough to stand in the frame. You have no right to be here, she said evenly. Vanessa scoffed. This isn't your house. My uncle stepped forward. It isn't yours either, he said. Silence. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty cross my father's face. The laughter was gone, and in its place, something closer to fear. The silence on the porch felt heavier than the shouting had. My father opened his mouth like he was about to say something, something authoritative, something final, but no sound came out. Vanessa looked between him and my uncle, her confidence cracking for the first time. This is ridiculous, she snapped, trying to regain control. You can't just turn against us. My uncle didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You turned against her first. He gestured toward me, standing just behind my aunt. I realized then how strange it felt to have someone physically place themselves between me and my parents. No one had ever done that before. My dad scoffed, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. You're really blowing this up. We just asked her to move out. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. You told me I didn't belong. You laughed while you did it. That laugh, the one he thought meant nothing. For a split second, his face tightened. Just enough for me to know he remembered it. This is family business, Mom said quietly. We can handle this. My aunt's response was instant. You already did. The door closed. That should have been the end of it. But my parents had never been good at letting go of control. The next morning, Daniel called. They've contacted me, he said calmly. Through someone else. They're asking questions they should have asked years ago. My stomach twisted. What happens now? Now, he replied, they learn what happens when entitlement meets reality. He explained everything in clear, careful terms. The house. The paperwork. The conditions your parents had ignored for years because no one challenged them. They assumed the support was unconditional, Daniel said. It wasn't. By afternoon, the calls started again. This time, from my dad. I didn't answer at first. Then I did. Elena, he said, his voice strained. We need to talk. Why? I asked. So you can laugh again? Silence. That wasn't. He stopped himself. I didn't mean it like that. But you did it, I said. And you meant it enough to throw me out. He exhaled shakily. Vanessa pushed. Your mother agreed. I thought. You thought I'd come back, I finished. Like I always do. Another pause. I didn't think it would go this far, he admitted quietly. That was the moment something inside me finally settled. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry it had consequences. Later that day, Daniel sent the formal notice. Not dramatic. Not threatening. Just undeniable. My parents were required to vacate the house within 30 days. Vanessa called me immediately. You did this, she screamed. You ruined everything. I held the phone away from my ear. When she paused to breathe, I spoke calmly. No, I said. You did. I hung up. By the end of the week, the denial crumbled. Dad showed up alone this time. No shouting. No arrogance. Just exhaustion. He stood on my aunt's porch, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, eyes avoiding mine. I didn't think it would end like this, he said quietly. I studied him, the man who'd laughed while I packed my life into bags. Neither did I replied. He swallowed. I should have protected you. Yes, he should have. But that realization came too late. I can't fix it, he continued. But I regret it. The words were real this time. I could hear it. They just didn't change anything. I hope you do, I said gently. Because I won't carry this anymore. He nodded, eyes glassy. When he left, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. That night, I lay awake thinking about how strange life was. How the moment you stop begging for love is the moment people finally notice your absence. And how sometimes, regret doesn't come from losing someone. It comes from realizing they were never as weak as you thought. The house emptied faster than I expected. I wasn't there when my parents packed their things, but I heard about it from neighbors, from distant relatives, from people who had never cared enough to intervene when I was the one being pushed out. Boxes lined the driveway. Furniture loaded into a rented truck. Vanessa pacing, furious, barking orders that no one followed anymore. She'd never been good without an audience. My parents moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Temporary, they told people. Just until things settled. Nothing was settling. Vanessa took it the hardest. She showed up at my aunt's house one afternoon, eyes wild, mascara smudged, fury barely holding together her composure. This was supposed to be mine, she hissed. The room. The house. Everything. I met her gaze calmly. You already had everything. She laughed bitterly. You think you won? Look at you. You had to hide behind lawyers. I tilted my head. No. I finally stood in the truth. That sent her over the edge. You were nothing without us, she screamed. Dad laughed because you were ridiculous. Mom agreed because you never mattered. The words didn't cut the way she expected. Because they weren't new. I mattered enough to break your illusion, I said softly. And that's what you hate. She slapped the doorframe on her way out, screaming that I'd regret this. I didn't. A week later, Daniel called with the final confirmation. It's done, he said. The ownership has been formally restructured. Your parents have no claim. no leverage. I sat down slowly, my legs shaking. And me? I asked. There was a pause. You're protected. Protected. I'd never heard that word used about me before. The last message I ever received from my mother came that night. I hope one day you understand why we did what we did. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted it. Because understanding doesn't mean accepting cruelty. Days passed. Quiet ones. No yelling. No accusations. No walking on eggshells. For the first time, my thoughts felt like my own. My dad tried once more. He left a voicemail. His voice sounded older. Smaller. I thought if I backed your sister, things would stay easy, he said. I didn't think I'd lose you. He did. And that loss sat with him heavier than the house ever could. Vanessa stopped calling. Rumor had it she blamed everyone but herself. That she told people I was manipulative, ungrateful, cold. It didn't matter. I had spent my entire life being misunderstood. I wasn't about to start explaining myself now. One evening, my aunt asked if I wanted to see the house. I don't have to, I said quickly. I know, she smiled. But you might want to. Standing in front of it again felt surreal. The same porch, the same windows, but the energy was different. Empty, quiet, mine. Inside, the rooms echoed. No laughter, no insults, no plans to knock down walls that never belonged to Vanessa. I walked into what had been my room. Sunlight streamed through the window like it always had. For the first time, I didn't feel small in it. I felt present. I ran my fingers along the wall, breathing in slowly. I hadn't taken something back. I had reclaimed myself. I didn't move back into the house right away. Not because I couldn't, but because I needed to understand something first. For most of my life, I believed home was a place you earned by being agreeable, quiet, useful. I thought if I just tried harder, if I stayed smaller, I would finally deserve to belong. Standing in that empty house taught me how wrong I'd been. Belonging isn't granted by people who benefit from your silence. It's claimed by the moment you stop apologizing for existing. A week later, my aunt handed me a small set of keys. They were warm from her palm, heavier than they looked. You don't owe anyone an explanation, she said. You belong wherever you choose to be. I swallowed hard. Thank you for believing me. She smiled gently. We always did. The first night I slept there alone, the house creaked the way it always had. But the sounds didn't scare me anymore. They felt honest. Empty spaces adjusting to truth. I walked through every room slowly barefoot, letting myself feel it all. The grief, the relief, the strange sense of rebirth. This was the house where I'd learned how to disappear. Now it was the place where I would finally take up space. A few days later, my boyfriend Ethan helped me move in. He didn't ask questions. He never had. He just showed up with boxes, coffee, and that steady presence that made the world feel manageable. You okay? He asked as we set the last box down. I nodded, surprised to realize it was true. Yeah, I really am. My parents never came back. No apologies. No explanations. Just silence. For a long time, that silence hurt. Then it healed. Because silence is peaceful when it no longer comes from rejection, but from distance you choose. I heard through family channels that Dad wasn't laughing anymore. That he talked about me in the past tense, like someone he'd misplaced and never expected to find again. Regret changes people. But it doesn't rewrite history. Vanessa moved on quickly. New apartment, new circle, new version of the story where she was still the victim. I stopped checking. I stopped caring. Not out of bitterness. Out of freedom. One evening, I sat on the front porch watching the sky turn gold, the same way it used to when I was younger, and felt trapped inside myself. I thought about the girl I'd been. The one who packed her life into bags while her father laughed behind a closed door. I wished I could tell her something. Not that it would get better, but that she would get stronger. That one day, the people who dismissed her would be forced to face what they lost. And she wouldn't need their regret to survive it. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs completely. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. And that was everything.